Tonight, we'll take a special in-depth look at one of the most remarkable forecasting centers throughout the United States, one of the premier weather and ocean forecasting centers in the world, Monterey's own Fleet Numerical Meteorology and Oceanography Center. Our first guest is the Scientific and Technical Director of Fleet Numerical, Mike Clancy.
Hi, John.
Mike, it's great to have you on your town.
Great to be here.
There are many things about FNMOC as the acronym, and we'll use the acronym because it's so much quicker and easier.
Most people do.
There are so many things about FNMOC that often go unnoticed in our local community. A lot of people may know about the supercomputing capability, and they may even have a sense that you're creating weather forecast products and some ocean prediction models, but you do a lot more than just forecast weather and ocean conditions. So start with the big picture FNMOC mission and requirements.
Sure. We do keep kind of a low profile. We are across the airport from the Monterey Peninsula Airport, across the runway there. And we basically are the Navy's global numerical weather prediction center. So we run numerical weather prediction models to predict the weather anywhere the Navy may operate in the world. But we also produce a number of other products, for example, weather satellite imagery products that complement our numerical weather predictions. We also produce a number of tactical decision aids, and these are products that help a decision maker out at sea in the fleet take into account the effect of weather on his operations. So we do a lot of those kinds of things. Supercomputing is a big part of what we do. It's the engine on which our products and models run. So a lot of people are probably aware of the fact that we are a leading supercomputer center. But really, numerical weather prediction is the core of what we do, supplemented by satellite processing and various meteorological tactical decision aid kinds of things.
This is a remarkable undertaking because, first of all, your center is receiving massive amounts of data collected by United States and international partners worldwide. And that raw data is funneling into Monterey, where it goes through some significant data processing, raw processing, and then you create this suite of numerical models. How much data flow are we talking about? Can you provide some measure or metric that people
that's exactly right, John. We're actually getting about 10 million observations a day flowing into Fleet Numerical from weather sensors all around the world. Most of that data is satellite data coming from both geostationary and polar orbiting satellites. Lots of information coming from ships at sea, from drifting buoys, from land stations, from basically all the systems that are out there measuring the atmosphere on a global basis. That data comes into us every day, goes into our computers, gets decoded, quality controlled, and then assimilated into our numerical weather prediction models using very sophisticated techniques for data assimilation, which basically takes those observations and maps them to a uniform, gridded kind of three-dimensional representation of the atmosphere. That provides the initial conditions for our weather forecast. Then our numerical weather prediction models, which are basically very large, complex computer programs that solve the equations that govern the evolution of the weather, they take over and produce forecasts. So it's a very complex operation. It's very much a real-time operation. We're running most of our models 4 times a day, so every 6 hours this whole process is repeating 24/7. And with this 10 million observations a day coming in, it's just a tremendous flow of data and a lot of complexity in that processing of the observations and the running of the models.
For the average citizen, getting a forecast for temperature, precipitation, possibly winds, that helps them prepare for the day ahead, especially if they're going to work or planning a trip and catching a plane. Your forecast products are going to a lot of different users. These are users at shore commands, they're in large centers. They could be aircraft carriers or carrier air groups or a whole range of users. Just in a thumbnail, who are some of the special users that receive your forecast products?
Well, first and foremost, we support the Navy. Of course, we are a Navy activity. But there are many other uses of our products. The National Weather Service, the Air Force, all service branches, other government agencies such as NOAA National Weather Service use our products. But first and foremost, we support the Navy. And our primary role there is sort of twofold. One, to ensure fleet safety, and two, to improve warfighting effectiveness. So our role in improving or supporting fleet safety is basically to keep the fleet safe from weather threats, keep them away from high winds and high seas, from dangerous hurricanes and typhoons, and to keep the fleet safe no matter where it's operating in the world. Could be the middle of the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, the Southern Ocean. Wherever they are, they're looking to Fleet Numerical to first and foremost ensure that fleet safety. The second aspect of what we do is warfighting effectiveness, and there we're trying to help the Navy make better decisions on accounting for the environment and how it deploys its ships, aircraft, sensors, and weapons to more effectively carry out its mission. But as I mentioned, we also support the Air Force. They use some of our flight routing products. We exchange a lot of data with the National Weather Service. For example, many of our hurricane track forecasts are used by the National Hurricane Center down in Miami. And the hurricane forecasts that come out of there are based on a consensus of 5 different models, and we contribute 2 of those 5 different models. So when a hurricane is bearing down on the Gulf Coast or the East Coast, Fleet Numerical is contributing a lot to that forecast skill of those hurricane forecasts.
When you mentioned fleet safety, Mike, of course there are some remarkable historic examples of adverse damaging weather or sea conditions that affected military operations. And for typhoons, there's the Halsey's typhoon
Absolutely.
that destroyed, in which many sailors were killed and ships were sunk.
Yes, major event in World War II. I don't have all the details at my disposal right now, but several ships were lost, and I think in excess of 500 men were lost in that event. And of course, a big part of our mission is to make sure that never happens again. The Navy's going to be deploying a new ship called the Littoral Combat Vessel, the LCS, Littoral Combat Ship. And that's a vessel that's fairly small and really oriented towards fighting in the coastal environment. It's very sensitive to weather, and there's a lot of concern about keeping that ship safe from weather threats. We also perform the mission called SubWEAX at Fleet Numerical, and that's submarine en route weather forecasting. And it kind of sounds like, what are you worrying about weather for submarines? But it turns out a submarine is very vulnerable to weather when it comes near the surface. And they come near the surface to communicate, to look around, to do various other things. Very, very vulnerable to weather, high winds and high seas conditions. Submarines are also quite vulnerable when they're going in and out of port. So they look to us to provide that special weather support for the submarine mission. We've been doing that for about the last 3 or 4 years. And it's been extremely successful. We even had the commander of the submarine force, a very senior admiral in the Navy, make a special trip to visit us a couple of years ago and thank us for the support we're providing to the submarine force. So again, fleet safety is right at the top of our priority list, and in addition to that, we also do a lot to improve the Navy's effectiveness in carrying out its missions.
Well, this is such a remarkable story for Fleet Numerical because in addition to the fleet safety, you mentioned being able to improve or support the warfighting capability. And in this era of robotics, with especially the use of autonomous vehicles that collect data, transmit that data back to troops and far abroad, the weather conditions can certainly be a factor in the operations of that autonomous vehicle. Now, what's the granularity on your forecast products? Can you, through your regional centers, distribute forecast information that helps that unit on the ground in the field? That's
certainly what we strive for. We run global models. We have a global numerical weather prediction model, which kind of provides the large-scale view of what the large-scale weather patterns are. But when we get down to that granularity you're talking about, we support that with a regional model. We have a regional model called COAMPS, Coupled Ocean Atmosphere Mesoscale Prediction System. And that model is run down to scales as fine as 3 or 6 kilometers, provides a much more detailed depiction of what's going on in the atmosphere. For example, gives you a more precise indication of when a frontal system is going to pass, can depict the effect of land breezes and sea breeze, such as affect us here in the Monterey Peninsula region frequently, can depict the effect of local winds on dust storms and so forth. But you mentioned the autonomous vehicles, and indeed they are very much impacted by weather, and issues there are things like icing. You know, can you fly that Predator over the mountain range to do what it has to do, given the fact that it doesn't have a lot of power, it's susceptible to icing, susceptible to high winds. You've got to land that aircraft. They're very light, and they can't tolerate a lot of crosswinds, so crosswind effects on takeoff and landing are an issue. And then finally, you've got sensors aboard the aircraft that's going to are going to be observing what's going on the ground, and they're very impacted by things like precipitation, aerosols in the atmosphere. Certainly clouds can affect the ability of that platform to perform its mission, and those are all the kind of things that we do in fact support.
Mike, when you listen to this incredible spectrum of prediction products that your center creates and the data that it manages to handle in developing these forecast products, one might get the impression that this is an enormous center with hundreds and hundreds of personnel assigned. It is not, though, is it?
It is not. We're actually a pretty small investment compared to many of the other global numerical weather prediction centers in the world, of which there are about a dozen or so. We've got about 130 civilian employees, about 20 officers, about 20 enlisted, and about a dozen or so contractors. So that's the total workforce there. And the fact that we're able to do what we do is really a tremendous credit to our workforce. We have some very bright, very dedicated people who have a tremendous culture of getting the job done. You'll find people working on the weekends, coming in late at night to fix a problem, because we are a 24/7 operation. So we have some very talented, very bright, very dedicated people, military, civilian, and contractor. We're also supported very, very effectively by the Naval Research Laboratory. The Naval Research Lab is, of course, the Navy's corporate laboratory based mainly in Washington, D.C. But here in Monterey, we have the Marine Meteorology Division of NRL co-located with us on the Fleet Numerical compound, and actually sharing buildings with us. Very bright scientists there, world-class, well-known international scientists, leaders in the worlds of numerical weather prediction, data assimilation, remote sensing. And they work side by side, elbow to elbow with our folks. We have a very effective, very, very well proven, very successful process of transitioning research and development into operations with the NRL Fleet Numerical team. And you'll find that that process works very, very well, very effectively. And as a result of that, with a relatively modest investment compared to some of the other weather prediction efforts in the world, we are able to be right up there and competitive with the best in the world. And so it's a real credit to the folks that work here in the Monterey Peninsula.
I'd like to drill down on that aspect of collaboration and the cycle to bring new products, operational forecast products online, because there are always evolving and emerging requirements. The evolution of autonomous vehicles brought a whole new set of requirements for field forecast.
That's right.
So give us a little bit more detail on how this collaboration begins to unfold, and then how you manage to actually bring a new model into the forecast suite and be confident that you're giving the end user something that they can trust and utilize.
Right. Well, it all starts with requirements and getting the requirements right. And those requirements come to us from FNMOC, that's the Commander Naval Meteorology and Oceanography Command. We're part of that command. And that command is headed by Admiral John White down at Stennis Space Center, Mississippi. And Admiral White has working for him an organization called the Naval Oceanography Operations Command, the NOOC. And that organization, part of their responsibility is to go out and figure out what are the requirements. What are the requirements coming from the fleet, from the folks that are out there flying the aircraft, operating the ships and submarines? What do they really need from METOC, from Meteorology and Oceanography? So they're the ones who basically define those requirements for us. Those requirements then get turned into R&D goals, so research and development comes into play. And the oceanographer in the Navy, Admiral Titley and and Washington is the primary funder for the R&D efforts that's managed by the Space and Naval Warfare Command down in San Diego. That results in an R&D effort at the Naval Research Laboratory, and ultimately gets to the point where a product is ready to be transitioned to our operational computer systems. At that point, our folks and the folks at NRL are working side by side to install a new capability on our computer, check it out, demonstrate its capability, and ultimately get it out to the customer for their use.
We've got time for perhaps one more question before we take a short break. Fleet Numerical is about to have an important milestone in the command's lifetime. It's a 50th anniversary. That's in a few months. Tell me about this 50th anniversary event.
We're looking forward to that. On Thursday, May 19th, we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary, commemorating 50 years since Fleet Numerical Weather Facility was stood up on the grounds of Naval Postgraduate School. Congressman Farr will be our keynote speaker, and we'll also have Admiral White and Admiral Titley there. We're going to be also actually dedicating our construction project. There's a military construction project which going on the last couple of years we're just finishing up on. We're doing the ribbon cutting on that and celebrating our 50th anniversaries event. We'll be reviewing the history of Fleet Numerical. We'll be recognizing our previous COs. We'll be recognizing our Hall of Fame members. Doing a lot of reminiscing, bringing in hopefully a lot of our retirees, a lot of former COs, and really celebrating the history of this organization and how numerical weather prediction, the Navy's involvement in it, has really evolved over the last 50 years.
Will people in the community be able to take part in any of the activities?
Yes, it is going to be open to the public, and we're hoping people who are interested in this kind of thing can come out and see that. We'll have a modest tour. Can't take people everywhere, but we'll have a tour of certainly the new spaces, including our new ops floor and new auditorium. We'll have a lot of historical displays set up, including memorabilia and pictures and maybe some movie loops and things from the early history of the organization, and it should be a lot of fun.
So you'll not only be able to celebrate this legacy that you've created during the first 50 years of operation, but also look forward to some of the future programs that you're working to bring online.
We will. In fact, we hope to have we plan to have some panel discussions where we will talk about the Fleet Numerical of the past, the Fleet Numerical of the present, the Fleet Numerical of the future, and talk about kind of where we are, where we're going, and where we've come from. So it should be a pretty robust and interesting event.
That's great. Mike, I know you're going to stay with us. Please stay tuned. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be joined by Lieutenant Commander John Marburger. You're watching Yorktown Radio and Television program. Mike Clancy, Scientific and Technical Director of Fleet Numerical Meteorology and Oceanography Center, is still here. And we're joined by Lieutenant Commander John Marburger. John, welcome to Yorktown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, the name for your incredible center, Fleet Numerical, sometimes people hear that numerical part and they ask the basic question, why is that part of your name? What's the significance of Fleet Numerical?
Yeah, that refers to the fact that we run numerical weather prediction models. So what's a numerical weather prediction model? It's basically a very large, complex computer program which uses numerical techniques, and that's basically using the computer to solve equations that predict the weather. So it starts with looking at the basic physics equations that describe the atmosphere and how the atmosphere changes over time, and translating those equations into things that can be solved with a computer using these so-called numerical techniques. And it's just sort of an iterative way of solving equations that are really too complex and too difficult to solve any other way. So that's kind of where that term numerical comes from. The word numerical has been in our name since the very beginning, all the way back to 1961. So it's kind of our brand name, Fleet Numerical. We've been Fleet Numerical, various things, different names over the years, but the words fleet and numerical have always been there. It's kind of our brand name. The fleet part tells you that we support the fleet. First and foremost, we're supporting the Navy. The numerical part refers to the fact that we are a numerical weather prediction center, which means we run these large, complex computer weather prediction models.
Yeah. I'm the kind of guy who has a tough time balancing my checkbook. Sometimes I resort to using my fingers.
That's right.
So 10 million bits of data, and then trying to quality control that, work it into mathematical models, and create numerical prediction products. It just, to me, it's sort of a stunning process.
It's very complex.
John, you're an ops guy at the center right now, about to wrap up your tour here and head to an aircraft carrier. But how long have you been at Fleet Numerical, and what are key things that you do on the operations floor?
I've been at Fleet Numerical for about 3.5 years now, which is a little bit longer than average. I stayed a little bit longer to get the ship that I wanted to get. On an average day-to-day basis, my job is taking all the information that is produced at Fleet Numerical, making sure that gets out to the fleet. That is a wide number of customers, both Department of Defense and non-DoD type folks. And also, the other big part of it is what Mike talked about before, is the submarine WEAX mission. So making sure that the forecasters that are stationed there at Fleet Numerical take that information, use the models that we create in some instances, and then get a proper and accurate and reliable forecast out to the boats that we're supporting at any given time.
Mentioning the submarine forecast, we have a number of, the United States has a number of allies with some significant submarine assets. Do those allies use your submarine forecasts as well?
Yes, sir, they do. Actually, from the very beginning when we started submarine forecasting, the oceanographer that was in charge of the mission to begin with, that came to us with the requirement, had a requirement not only for United States submarines, but also allied submarines. They tend to be a lot different than our fairly standard type submarines, but we also forecast for them as well, and they can be a little bit of a different challenge, given that they have various sizes. They're not all nuclear submarines. A lot of them are diesel. But we provide support for them. Probably about 10% of our submarine WEAX goes out to allied and other type submarines.
Yeah, the requirements for a diesel submarine, and especially perhaps time at surface, that would be considerably different from a nuke.
The major thing that we have to take into account when forecasting for different foreign submarines is the fact that they're much smaller in many cases than our submarines. So while a 5 to 7 foot seas situation might affect our submarine in only a moderate way, it would affect a diesel submarine or a smaller submarine in a very dramatic way. That's the biggest issue.
That's really intriguing. Who are some of your other customers, John?
We have a wide range of customers that's out there. The Navy, as the TD mentioned before, is our number one customer. The most important when we're sitting out on the watch floor that I make my watch team well aware of are the guys and gals that are calling from one of the ships that is out at sea. They don't have very good communications to call back to us, so we make sure that if they call back needing some sort of specific product or some sort of product that maybe is not getting out to them in the proper way, we definitely take them through a hand-holding process and make sure that they get exactly what they need. Beyond that, our customers are the Fleet Weather Centers at Norfolk and San Diego now. They are the forecasters, just like us, that are stationed at those two centers, and they're in charge of most of the ship routing and the aviation forecasting that goes on throughout the world. And those are some of our other customers. We have a wide array of others. I can think of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and some others, the onesies, twosies that come up, but also the Air Force. We provide information to them, as well as some civilian institutions, National Weather Service, and other civilian agencies.
Bandwidth for ships at sea has long been a challenge. Sometimes, in fact, all too often at home in the evening, my wife will say, "Oh, darn, I just got bumped off the internet." Usually it's fortunate because then it cuts on a shopping trip or something like that. But for a ship at sea to lose connectivity or not be able to pull in some of your weather products, weather and ocean products, could actually impair their operations or not enable them to be as effective in their operations. How do you handle this connectivity with ships at sea?
One of the biggest ways that we take care of stuff like that is that we're very sensitive when we gather requirements of what the ships need out at sea. We make sure that we're gathering the requirements and providing that information to them in a way that is not bandwidth intensive. It is, though, a constant problem. Even in today's day and age with the bandwidth that they have, even on the carriers, it can get bogged down very quickly, very, very quickly. So we use, our main method of getting out information to them is through JMV and METcast. That's the joint METOC viewer and METcast. They use, the forecasters on the ship use that program, that application developed at Fleet Numerical and primarily, I guess, at Fleet Numerical quite a bit. And then we also, when the bandwidth and the comms is good, we put out our information on something called the NEPOC, which is essentially a portal into all of Navy meteorology and oceanography products, whether that be Fleet Numerical products or Naval Oceanographic products. And they can come in and have one-stop shopping in that regard. But in many times, especially if the comm situation is poor, they can't use that website. So we're very sensitive to that fact.
Now, you had mentioned being able to identify the requirements for the user, especially in this example of ships at sea. Do you, and Mike, in the earlier interview, you had talked about the Navy command that,
Yes.
in fact, has a responsibility for defining
Right.
user requirements. Do you have users who come to Monterey and sit down and meet with you and go over their requirements?
Sure, that happens a lot, and I think one reason we've been successful over the years is we've been very responsive to user requirements. We have a lot of direct interaction with customers, and we try to be very responsive to our users and customers. We all have a very dynamic software environment. We're actually updating our software on a weekly basis and making changes and changing the models and adding new capabilities on a weekly basis, which is much more frequently than most large-scale numerical weather prediction centers do. So we have the capability of responding quickly to customer requirements. For example, when there's a major event going on, for example, the earthquake in Haiti or the tsunami in Indonesia, very quickly, I mean, and within less than an hour, we are going to be spinning up models. We are going to be producing tailored satellite imagery for that event, even before people are asking for it. So we are very responsive in responding to fleet requirements, particularly as real-world operations take place out there.
To pile on a little bit on that, that's one of the biggest reasons why we have military stationed at Fleet Numerical, is to be able to take those requirements that are coming in from the fleet, translate those, and put them in I guess, take out the military ease in some sense, and then translate those requirements to the programmers and the modelers that are civilians there at Fleet Numerical.
Let me jump in on that one. We have a great relationship, military-civilian relationship at Fleet Numerical. It's one of our big strengths here. There's a large core of civilians that have been there for a long time, like myself, that kind of provide the long-term stability. But we have the military continually coming in and refreshing our viewpoint on what's important out there. Oftentimes they're coming directly from a carrier, directly from the fleet, and they have experience with what works, what doesn't work, what's really needed out there, and they bring that viewpoint to our operation, and that helps us become very much in tune with our customers out there. It works very well.
Now, John, you mentioned that you've been at Fleet Numerical for about 3.5 years, so you would have been at a prior command when Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast. Have you heard stories about what took place on the watch floor and in operations at Fleet during Hurricane Katrina? Because as I recall, there was a lot of back and forth on the forecast models and who was really getting the storm accurate, predicting the path of the storm accurately.
I guess I can probably comment on that. I was involved in that when it happened. Yeah, our NOGAPS model, our global model, actually was the first global weather prediction model to show the shift of the storm towards New Orleans. And that happened, I think, about probably about 72 hours before landfall. Most of the models were showing the storm coming ashore on the Florida Panhandle, and our global model we call NOGAPS, and shortly thereafter our tropical cyclone model we call GFDN, were I believe the first two models that showed that shift to New Orleans a full 12 hours before the other models showed that. So that was a real win. And again, the hurricane forecasters at the Hurricane Center look at a range of models, but those two models I just mentioned are part of that consensus they use there. After Katrina hit, we of course were supporting our colleagues down in Mississippi, and we did a lot of backup for the Naval Oceanographic Office, our partner production center down there, ran some backup models for them. And we even actually, some of the military folks on our, in fact junior military folks on our watch floor actually played a role in helping coordinate some of the search and rescue application or search and rescue operations that took place on the Gulf Coast in the days immediately after the storm. So we were very, very closely engaged with that event.
You have numerical prediction models that try and help you forecast where the optimum area would be to look on a search and rescue initiative, don't you?
We do.
Yes.
Yeah. It's called WebSAR, Web Search and Rescue, and basically it allows someone on board a ship to reach back to us, and they'll tell us where's the last known location of where a sailor has been lost at sea, or they're looking for something. And this system will automatically go in and grab the ocean currents from the Naval Oceanographic Office, runs a very good ocean model, take the winds that we predict, the waves that we predict, the water temperatures, and produce a product which basically tells the searchers where to search, where's the most likely location this person will be found over the next X number of days or hours, and also information about survivability given the water temperature and the winds and things like that.
You mentioned reach back capability, and you've mentioned, of course, John, the interaction, real-time interaction with users while they're trying to obtain some of your forecast products. Soon, you're going to be deploying aboard I believe, the Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, sir.
Do you know where the Lincoln might be in its deployment cycle when you arrive?
Yeah, they'll be just coming back from deployment, and then we're going to be surging just a few months after I get there. So, my time at Fleet Numerical certainly is going to help in knowing what I can reach back to. I've always had a good relationship with Fleet Numerical. Getting back to the Katrina comment, I was actually the operations officer at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center at the time. So while we weren't forecasting for the storm in the Gulf, all the typhoon duty officers and me as the operations officer were certainly looking very closely at how NOGAPS was performing, which is the model that comes out of Fleet Numerical and GFDN. And we did notice the switch that happened over that predicted it to hit New Orleans ahead of the other models. So my time here at Fleet Numerical has been, I think, very valuable to me as a naval officer. I can certainly, I know a lot of the personalities back here that I can reach back to, and definitely plan on using that capability when I'm out at sea.
Yeah. Finally, customer feedback. Obviously, you get input when you're working with a customer real time. Are there other means by which you get customer feedback that help you to fine-tune the prediction products that you use?
We do. I can speak to the sub-WEAX portion of that. In all of our forecasts that we send out, and this is forecasts that we're actually using our own models as one piece of the puzzle to make a forecast. At the bottom of all those forecasts, we always put, please provide impact to mission, please provide accuracy, how accurate we were, if we were on, or if we were off. We get some feedback. Obviously, the people that are out on submarines are very busy folks, but we're very appreciative whenever we do get that feedback. And if it's good, we file it away and make a note of it. We actually probably appreciate the critique more. It helps us to improve our process. And whenever we have something that comes back of a forecast that could have been a little bit better, it helps us to look at the models It helps us to ascertain our own processes and to make sure that we're getting the most reliable and accurate forecast that we can out to the submarines at any given time.
And you're constantly doing self-assessments with colleagues here in Monterey and colleagues in universities as well.
Yeah, we're constantly calculating verification statistics for our models. It's just a routine part of the process. We are constantly measuring the skill of the models and how that forecast skill varies over time. And we can track back all the way back to actually the 80s and how the forecast skill of our model has improved. And basically, like most numerical weather prediction centers, we've improved the forecast skill of our models at the rate of about 1 day per decade. So that means our 5-day forecast now is about as good as our 3-day forecast was 20 years ago. So we're continuing to push that envelope and improve the models.
All right. Mike, John, thanks for being guests on Your Town.